Welcome into Boxing Scene Today. Today is the day we hear from you. That's right, midweek mailbag day. Just go to Boxing Scene, leave a comment. They answer the questions, and so do we. So you get to read it and hear it at the same time. Have the right people to answer the questions. That's right, the champs, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi, joining us via Zoom. Also, Coach Robert Garcia. Call him champ as well, but also a champion coach. But a lot of the questions today, of course, about Boots Ennis. Let's get right to it. First one is from Cyborg Fangaloo, who says, will we see Boots with an A-level fighter? He calls out everyone all the time, but never gets great fights. Why? Is it his promotion? Is he avoided? He has repeatedly said he wants big-name opponents, moved up in weight class, but at the same time, he's made decisions or has had constraints about timing, contract terms, and weights, which might create delays or missed opportunities. I like this question because it's kind of like, where does it come from, Chris? He's a great fighter. He's in a great weight class. His debut, of course, was a serious step down. But this idea that there have been things in the way previously. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the criticisms are there for a reason because,
Yeah.
he's at a point now, he's at 30 plus wins. He's 30, however many his record is 34-0 or 33-0, whatever it is. And he has yet to have a marquee opponent or a name guy on there. And there's been opportunities. There's been opportunities for there to be those big fights. At 147, him and Virgil Ortiz were set to fight. That didn't work out. Then they were moving up. They said they were still going to fight. Then he went back down to 47. So there's a lot of things that he's done in the past that makes the criticism real. But in terms of when are we going to see him with an A-class fight, I think he's running out of options. You can't just keep taking these kinds of fights and expect to be mentioned as one of the best fighters in the world. And he's in a weight class that is absolutely stacked with talent. I mean, the top 15 guys in that weight class can all fight. And they won't be the biggest name marquee opponents in terms of their profile, but in terms of their ability, they're going to be real fights. And yes, Boots looked amazing on Saturday night when he knocked out Lima. But what is Lima? A B- C class opponent at this point in a division that's this stacked. He's really going to have to step up soon if he's going to live up to even half of the hype of that what he's getting out there. But in terms of where the criticism comes from, I understand it. I understand where the frustration is coming from the fans.
Well, if only we had someone who had done some negotiating on behalf of a great 154-pounder, Virgil Ortiz. Oh, we do, Coach Garcia. From your vantage point as a coach who's on that management side, you're in fighters' ears. Have there been difficulties working with Boots and his camp? Have there been, as you said, as Chris said, roadblocks because he was supposed to fight Virgil Ortiz?
Well, look, if you talk to Eddie Hearn, he's going to say the contract signed and they're ready to go and they already signed the contract, which is not the case. We know that we have to know when you have a young fighter, you have a young superstar, the promoter, the management team, they got to protect him and guide him the right way. Of course, you got the people like Eddie Hearn and stuff that are talking and he's the best in the world and I've never worked with anybody better than this kid. Well, that's just building him up and trying to get the world to believe it. But until he faces somebody decent in the division, there is the cases where I could probably say Virgil Ortiz. We would love to fight Fundora, but the WBC doesn't call the fight where they have to face each other, or any of the other champions. The IPF maybe is not a good idea for us because of what Virgil has had in the past with his health issues, and the IPF only allowing him to gain 10 pounds for the next day in the morning is impossible for Virgil to do because of his health issues that he's had in the past. We don't want to risk him. We just don't want to take that chance. But Boots Ennis is there. The fighters are there. The names are there. The opponents are there ready to fight him. At least fight somebody, decent, top 10. We can't do that. Virgil goes and fights Ruben, which is a very decent name, a very, remarkable name. So that's what we have to do to prove the world that we want to fight the best. And if the best is not available, we'll go to whatever's next after that. Don't go looking at rankings and get somebody that's ranked in the top 30. You gotta get somebody a little bit more decent.
And Paulie, you know about having a great career. You also know about the politics of this sport. How much of the lack of quality opposition do you lay at the feet of Boots Ennis, and how much is other things around it, Paulie, in your opinion?
Yeah, some of it. I mean, at welterweight, there was a problem because he was around during the bigger name times, and that's just a problem with boxing in general that I'm seeing now is that, fighters reach a certain profile and then they become too cool to fight the up and coming stud that's coming up right behind everybody, you know. So that has turned this into more of a sideshow than the sport the great sport that it once was. And I hate to see that. I've seen other fighters do that to people, and I felt like that was being done to Jaron. And so I felt for him, and I sort of, I felt sorry for him because he's a good fighter, and I felt like he would have competed well even with that prior regime, so to speak. When his time did come, the big names were gone. The win over Stanionis looks good on paper. It is solid, so he did chase that and get it and get that win. But at 154, we're we've lost so much time with Jaron Ennis, and the potential that we don't want to see any of these kinds of fights. Lima, really, what was he? I can name several pro box fighters that are probably better than Lima. Fighters that fight on pro box. Guys like Vladimir Hernandez is probably better than Lima. The guy Jaron that beat Hernandez is better than Lima. Raul Garcia is better than Lima. Emiliano Moreno.
Flaws at 47. Yeah.
But Flaws at 47, but at 54 we got Darrell Valsaint. These are all 154 pounders that are better than Lima. Right now they would beat Lima right now. Yet Lima was chosen as a Jaron Ennis opponent. So, I get that it's maybe tough to get the big fights, the tough fights, but like Champ Chris said, the top 15 here, that's pretty tough. And to go and find Lima, you had to go scrape the bottom of the barrel. You really did. In a weight class that's got so many good fighters and even lesser known fighters that are pretty good, So I don't know. I am a fan of seeing Ennis against top fighters and a fan of seeing Ennis perform, but I don't like to see, guys fight guys that are just sacrificial lambs. I've complained a lot about, upper stars doing that all the time, and it's happening more and more in boxing. So I'm not a fan of that happening. So I'd like to see the matchups come together. A fight with Virgil would be terrific, but even the title fight in general, and then a fight with Virgil. I believe Virgil against Jaron would be a great world championship fight for the American scene, So if one of them could pick up a world championship and then make that fight, that would be terrific. But in the meantime, I don't want to see Jaron fight the Uber drivers like Gervonta Davis does, or Canelo was doing recently. I want to see, the fights now being made because Jaron for a while didn't have a choice. Now it seems like you have a choice, So like to answer your question, Jimmy, yeah, there was a time where that may have been excusable, but at this point, I don't think it is. Hearn had the goal to make a comparison to say that, Lima going into the fight last week, that Lima was just as good of an opponent as Erickson Lubin is for Virgil. I mean, that goes back to the quote that I like to say from one of my buddies, that one of my buddies was a door guy at a club. He was a big guy and he used to hear all the excuses in the world for guys trying to get into the club when they weren't allowed in. And he used to have this great line that, it's maybe not politically correct, but he'd say, "Don't jerk me off, and I won't come in your face, guy." You know what I mean? That's sort of Eddie's jerking me off, and now I gotta come in his face. Pause. So I don't want to. I don't need that. I don't need you to make a mockery of things. You gotta do this right. And 154 pounds, there's a way to do it right. There's great fighters. Virgil's fighting some really good fighters. Back to back and out to back again. So, we see it. So it's not a thing where it's like, oh, he's a new guy on the block and he's got to move his way into it. No. The new guys on the block are now moved into the block, So that's it. They're officially established. Virgil is established. He was a new guy on the block. He's established. Jaron should be established as well. Fighting these type of guys. He's obviously got the ability and the talent and the destructive power, all that stuff. He's got all the intangibles. So we want to see them go to work against some top level opposition that does exist at 154 pounds.
Well, let's talk about that because another question came in from Anonymous 2.0. At this point, if I were Bakhram Murtazaliev, I would fire my current promoter and get in bed with the mainstream one. Paul, you've called him the boogeyman of the division, right? Lubin was supposed to fight him, then end up, of course, taking on Virgil Ortiz instead. Similar question about the politics and can he move forward and get a big fight, Paulie?
Yeah, this is where going down into the message boards gets a little bit tricky. Guys start talking about firing promoters. Dude, you can't fire promoters. If we could fire promoters, you know how many times we would fire promoters? Like we have contracts with them. They lock us in, and sometimes they lock us in like
no choice.
And then we're screwed, and we're like basically in jail, and we're at the mercy of what they can and cannot do. Yeah, lovely idea. Fire your promoter and when he sucks, when they suck, and just move on. Terrific idea. I wish every fighter could do that. Unfortunately, you can't do that. Once you sign a contract, you're locked in, and even if they breach the contract, you still have to go to court, and they have all kinds of lawyers, and they cost you all kinds of money and so on and so forth. So it becomes tough. Murtazaliev, fighting with main events. I don't know what genius on his team thought it was a good idea that signing with main events would have done anything for them, because at this point main events is basically floating in dead water, for a while. They were sort of keeping barely alive for a time, but honestly, they got no TV deal. They barely got a fighter to their name. I don't know what moron on Murtazaliev's team thought it was a good idea to go sign with main events, but it obviously wasn't going to work out, and now it's not working out because the guy is not able to acquire any type of fight. The TV fight that he got with Zoo was on the count of Amazon having the deal with PBC, because Zoo was a PBC fighter. So even as a world champion, the Murtazaliev can't get a TV date. So yeah, he's got big problems. But you can't go sign with people that missed their calling as a shoemaker and should be shining shoes rather than being boxing promoters, and instead became boxing promoters. You can't do that. You can't go sign with shoemakers.
Yeah, get your shine box. Chris, as Paulie gets his shine box, what I'm curious about is this idea that Murtazaliev, we talk about him kind of being the dark horse here. I mean, probably the least talked about, but one of the more dangerous guys at 54.
Yeah, Jim, I just want to talk about the username anonymous. As soon as you hear the username anonymous, you know the question is going to be dumb. It's a dumbass question. I'm going to drop my promoter. You can't, like Paulie said, you can't drop promoters. And really, promoters don't. It's a misnomer, the name promoter, because they rarely promote the fighters that they have. But
Yeah,
in terms of it's a booking
booking
agent, exactly. But this booking agent apparently takes a lot of side money to keep Murtazaliev from actually being in fights, and the poor guy is going to get aged out. He's 32 now. Everyone in the division is younger than him, so you got to kind of look at this and look at the writing on the wall. Does it seem like these younger champions are trying to age out the very dangerous boogeyman that is Murtazaliev? Certainly looks like it. And I think he's gotten used to taking step-aside money, because from what I've heard, he's been doing that for years, taking that step-aside money and not taking these big fights or these big opportunities. Then he finally gets his opportunity against Zoo and wipes the floor with him. And the world now knows who Murtazaliev is. And guess what? The world don't want anything to do with him because the guy is too dangerous. He is the definition of high risk, low reward until he won a title. Now there's an actual reward, and guys still don't want to fight him. That shows you how dangerous he is. And when you say like, oh, people don't really know about him. Hey, boxing people do. All of us are talking about him for a reason, because he is that dangerous. Fighters know, promoters know, managers know. The guy's a very difficult guy to deal with. And that shows in the fact that no one's lining up to try and get those title fights. But this is where the promoter, where they actually could do some work, is talk to the IBF. Who's the number one contender? Get the guy busy. Force these fights. Get a fight somewhere. Or take a trip over to Saudi. Talk about this guy with this sterling record who's super dangerous and puts on good fights. Granted, he's not a marketable guy. Granted, he doesn't speak English that well. Granted, he's not a guy who's going to go out there and scream from the rooftops that you want to see him fight. But the guy can fight, and he's got a title. And if you want to unify a division, he's there to make some money. So he has that bargaining chip. The fact that he is just wallowing out there in no man's land is really upsetting. I thought once this guy got a title, we were actually going to see him in action, because he is a damn good fighter. But once again, he's still sitting out there, and this is somewhere where the promotion should be taking it up. This is where the management should be stepping in and trying to get their fighter paid. But yeah, in terms of being able to fire those people, that's not the way it works. Like you said, Champ, there's contracts.
Yeah, Coach, when you look at it, this is a guy in Murtazaliev who's incredibly dangerous, but when we list the names at 104 pounds, it seems like, to Chris's point, everybody's a little more marketable. Talk about Fundora, you talk about Keith Thurman, of course, a very popular name. What do you do with a guy like this? As a coach, as a manager, it can be so frustrating having a dangerous fighter who's avoided, but that's what we have here, right, Coach?
Look, I really don't think it has much to do with this promotion, because he's got a great manager. Klimas is a great manager. Main events obviously doesn't have TV dates or anything like that, but they have a lot of fighters that they place in different promotions and different co-promotions. I think the problem is nobody wants to fight him.
That's surprising. I didn't know.
I think that's the problem.
Robert, I didn't know
Right.
I didn't know he was with Egis. That's surprising. Yeah,
Yes, he's got a
Egis is
great
a good
manager. Look.
Egis has some history with having put Kovalev with main events, but Egis also is smart enough to know that if a promoter doesn't have a TV deal, it's hard to get your guy paid, right?
But I believe me, I think if he was with Matchroom or PPC or whoever it is, he still have the same problem, because he's too dangerous, and people don't really recognize him. Don't know, a lot of people, random people, don't know who he is. So nobody wants to take that risk. Believe me, I'm telling you guys, because we've talked about the fight. It's been offered to us. I've talked to people that approached me. Why didn't Why didn't Virgil take the fight? Because of the 10-pound weight that we have to do by the next day. If the fight, because we try to do a unification, but they didn't allow the WBC interim to be part of the unification, because in the unification, the IBF don't apply that 10-pound rule by the next day in the morning. So unless it's for no title, which nobody would want to take a chance if it's no title available, or no title is going to be disputed, well, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. But we were up for the fight, but Virgil's health issues that he's had in the past, we're not going to take a risk where we have to protect him and protect his health, because the 10 pounds could be a big problem for him, and that's the only reason. But yeah, I don't think it has to do with the management or the promoter. I think it's just that he's too dangerous, and people are not going to take that risk.
Robert, what about Ennis talking to the Saudis? And when Jimmy brought up the Saudis, and
well, yeah,
Ennis has connections with the Saudis, right? Because he has Usyk that fights with the Saudis.
Yeah, it was the Saudis that offered the fight for Virgil. They asked me, why didn't Virgil take the fight? And I told them the reason. That's the only reason, because the 10 pounds that Virgil, it's just impossible for us to take a chance.
Maybe they can get somebody else.
Yeah,
if it's a non-title fight, we could do it. But no,
I heard Josh Kelly. I heard Josh Kelly is the mandatory, because Erickson bypassed it to fight Virgil. So now I heard Josh Kelly may get the shot. But again, can you do that fight in Saudi? Is Ennis going to talk to them about doing that? Because like I said, he has the connection to Saudi, because he has Alexander Usyk with the Saudis, right? So you definitely have the connection if you're Ennis Klimas. Maybe Murtazaliev and Josh Kelly can go to the Saudis. We'll see.
Well, we are hoping he gets his big money fight, as 154 continues to be a huge topic in the boxing world. Once again, go to Boxing Scene, make a comment, get your question in there. You, of course, read it on Boxing Scene as Lance Pugmire and the crew respond, and then we respond on videos. You can hear it both ways from our experts. Thanks to everybody who chimed in with a question and with an answer. Join us at Boxing Scene Today for all your boxing news and find out why millions are watching.